Chapter 8. Grace. 65 degrees Fahrenheit. For the next week, I was distracted in school, floating through my classes and barely taking notes. All I could think of was the feel of my wolf's fur under my fingers and the image of the wolf's white, snarling face outside my window. I snapped to attention, however, when Mrs. Rambuski led a policeman into the classroom and to the front of our life skills class. She left him alone at the front of the room, which I thought was pretty cruel, considering it was 7th period and most of us were restlessly anticipating escape. Maybe she thought that a member of the law enforcement would be able to handle mere high school students. But criminals you can shoot at, unlike a room full of juniors who wouldn't shut up. "Hi," the officer said. Beneath a gun belt that bristled with hostiles and pepper sprays and assorted weaponry, he looked young. He glanced toward Mrs. Rambuski, who hovered unhelpfully in the door of the classroom and fingered the shiny name on his shirt, William Kronig. Mrs. Rambuski had told us that he was a graduate of our fine school, but neither his name nor his face looked particularly familiar to me. "I'm Officer Kronig. Your teacher, Mrs. Rambuski, asked me last week if I'd come talk to her life skills class." I glanced over at Olivia in the seat next to me to see what she was making of this. As usual, everything about Olivia looked neat and tidy. Straight A report card made flesh. Her dark hair was plaited in a perfect French braid, and her collared shirt was freshly pressed. You could never tell what Olivia was thinking by her mouth. It was her eyes that you had to look at. "He's cute," Olivia whispered to me. "Love the shaved head. Do you think his mom calls him Will?" I hadn't yet figured out how to respond to Olivia's newfound and very vocal interest in guys, so I just rolled my eyes. He was cute, but not my type. I didn't think I knew what my type was yet. "I became an officer of the law right after high school," Officer Will said. He looked very serious as he said it, frowning in a sort of serve and protect way. "It's a profession, and I always wanted to pursue, and I take my job very seriously." "Clearly," I whispered to Olivia. I didn't think his mother called him Will. Officer William Kronig shot a look at us and rested his hand on his gun. I guess it was a habit, but it looked like he was considering shooting us for whispering. Olivia disappeared into her seat, and a few other girls giggled. It's an excellent career path, and one of the few that doesn't require college yet," he pressed on. "Are, any of you considering going into law enforcement?" It was the that did him in. If he hadn't hesitated, I think the class might have behaved. A hand whipped up. Elizabeth, one of the hordes of Mercy Falls students still wearing black since Jack's death, asked, "Is it true that Jack Culpler's body was stolen from the morgue?" The class erupted in whispers at her idiocy, and Officer Kronig looked as if he really didn't have a due cause to shoot her. But all he said was, "I'm not really authorized to talk about the details of any ongoing investigations." "Is it an investigation?" a male voice crawled out from the near front. Elizabeth interrupted. "My mom heard it was a dispatcher. Is it true? Would someone really steal a body?" Theories flew in quick succession. "It's got to be cover-up, for suicide, to smuggle drugs, a medical experimentation," some guy said. "I heard Jack's dad had stuffed a polar bear in his house. Maybe the Culplers stuffed Jack too." Someone took a swat at that guy who made the last comment. It was still taboo to say anything bad about Jack or his family. Officer Kronig looked aghast at Mrs. Rambuski, who stood in the door of the classroom. She regarded him solemnly and then turned to the class. "Quiet down." We quieted down. She turned back to Officer Koenig. "So his body was stolen?" she asked. He said again, "I'm not really authorized to discuss the details of any ongoing investigations." But this time, he sounded more helpless, like there might be a question mark at the end of his sentence. "Officer Koenig," Miss Rumbuski said, "Jack was well loved in this community." Which was a patent lie. But being dead had done wonders for his reputation. I guess everyone else could forget the way he'd lose his temper in the middle of the hall or even during class. And in just what those tempers looked like. But I hadn't. Mercy Falls was all about rumors. And the rumor on Jack was that he got his short fuse from his dad. I didn't know about that. It seemed like you ought to pick up the sort of person you would be, no matter what your parents were like. "We are still mourning," Mrs. Rambuski added, gesturing to the seat in the back of the classroom. "It's not about an investigation. It's about giving us closure and a close-knit community." Olivia mouthed at me, "Oh, my God." I shook my head. Amazing. Officer Koenig crossed his arms over his chest. It made him look petulant, like a little kid being forced to do something. "It's true. We're looking into it. I understand the loss of somebody so young." This, from someone who looked maybe 20, "has a huge impact on the community. But I ask everyone to respect the privacy of the family and the confidentiality of the investigation process." He was getting back on firm foot here. Elizabeth waved her hand again. "Do you think the wolves are dangerous? Do you get lots of calls about them?" "My mom said you get a lot of calls about them." Officer Koenig looked at Mrs. Rumbuski, but he should have figured out by now that she wanted to know just as much as Elizabeth did. "I don't think the wolves are a threat to this populace. No, I, and the rest of the department, feel this was an isolated incident." Elizabeth said, "But she got attacked too." Oh, lovely. I couldn't see Elizabeth pointing, but I knew she was, because everyone's faces turned toward me. I bit the inside of my lip. Not because the attention had bothered me, but because every time someone remembered I was dragged from my tire swing, they remembered it could happen to anyone. And I wondered how many someones it would take before they decided to go after the wolves. Go after my wolf. I knew this was the real reason why I couldn't forgive Jack for dying. In between that and his checkered history at the school, it felt hypocritical to go in public mourning along with the rest of the school. But I didn't feel right to ignore it either, though I wished I knew what I was supposed to be feeling. "That was a long time ago," I told Officer Koenig, and he looked relieved as I added, "years, and it might have been dogs." So I was lying. Who was really going to contradict me? "Exactly," Officer Koenig said empathetically. "Exactly. There's no point violating wild animals for a random incident, and there's no point creating panic when it's not warranted. Panic leads to carelessness, and carelessness creates accidents." My thoughts precisely. I felt a vague kinship with the humorless Officer Koenig as he steered the conversations back into the careers in law enforcement. After class was over, the other students started talking about Jack again, but Olivia and I escaped to our lockers. I felt a tight tug on my hair and turned around to see Rachel standing beside me, looking mournfully at both of us. "Babes, I have to rain check on vacation planning this afternoon. Step Freak has demanded a family bonding trip to Duluth. If she wants me to love her, she's going to have to buy me some new shoes. Can we get together tomorrow or something?" I barely nodded before Rachel flashed both of us a big smile